Hey everybody, Mike Miller, Herald Times columnist Jeremy Price, coming to you from Philadelphia, trading in the Wells Fargo Arena for the Wells Fargo Center.
Did I get a discount on my mortgage?
No,
No.
but you get a front row seat for a pretty darn good night of hoops.
Yes, I'll take it.
Notre Dame, Wisconsin, the first game here in Philadelphia, followed by the game you all care about, Indiana, North Carolina. Approximate tip 9:57, probably closer to 10. Probably just because it'll probably start at 10:30. Who knows?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't it at this point? My gosh.
Yeah, throw in a few overtimes for Notre Dame and Wisconsin. Way to jinx us.
God, that's not even funny. So yeah, we got to see Indiana today. Open workout. Wouldn't even call that a practice.
Shoot around. I would call it
around.
shoot
Yeah.
around. Yeah.
They had already practiced. They're actually at the Palestra, the famous historic Palestra here in Philadelphia. A little bit of a history lesson for IU today. Just seeing how old is that place? Like 80. It's over 80 years old.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
It's been around.
It's an old gym. I mean, Troy Williams' Uncle Boo played there with St. Joe's back in the day.
Late 70s, early 80s.
Did he tweeted something today? Did they have his number 5 retired there or something? Did they have any banners? Boo was a player there.
Yeah.
Boo was a really good,
Yeah.
really
I think
special
they were
player.
just. I think he was just tweeting some of the general banners there in the Palestra. But yeah, I mean, Boo had over 1,400, 1,500 career points.
He's
over
a
800
St.
career
Joe's legend.
rebounds. Had some huge games there, and what I hadn't really realized, I guess, I when I started looking at it, was that Boo's last game was against Indiana in the Elite Eight in 1981.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Yeah,
So how about
So-
that? More history lesson for
just
for today.
more connections, more history.
Yeah. So
Lots of that going on around here.
yes, very much so. Obviously, yeah, with all the connections with IU and Philadelphia, of course, IU and North Carolina. A lot of like you said, historical connections between these two programs, between the IU program and this city. They'll add another chapter tomorrow night, late tomorrow night. First things first, though, for Indiana, the injury report. Positives for Juwan Morgan and Colin Hartman, both of whom we frankly expected to play. Juwan Morgan said 100% he's playing tomorrow. He's obviously, again, used to popping that shoulder back in and
It's not
playing
really
through that
if
pain.
Juwan Morgan's is going to play; it's how long
and how
will
effective.
Juwan play.
I think you need at least, if you optimistically, best case scenario, at least 10, maybe 15 solid minutes.
Yeah.
And that
You want
really
double
need
digits.
that, yeah.
Got to have double digits.
And same for Hartman, who once again had his wrists taped with that padded support there. He's also going to go. It's, again, for him, it's just a matter of how effective he can be with that, especially from the perimeter, because, again, they're going to need that too. Really, though, it's Robert Johnson, and this is no surprise. That is a huge X factor for Indiana. He's, how should we say, a bit questionable still. Tom Crean said Tuesday. He was a bit iffy to play on Friday night. Really didn't. It was a very, again, a shoot around, very light workout. He really was never really. I didn't think he was going full go on that ankle at all. He was wearing a brace.
No.
And so,
But he wasn't going full go. But I didn't get the sense that he was holding back or being careful, particularly either. I mean, I thought he was doing all the things he needed to do. It's just the situation today wasn't obviously full speed. It didn't require the cutting,
stationary shooting,
the change of direction, all those things that game day involves that shoot around doesn't.
When you look at the comparison between Indiana and North Carolina, especially with that backcourt, an area where Indiana could potentially have an advantage, obviously having Rob would certainly tilt things in Indiana's favor for a number of reasons.
Yeah, I think it at least evens it, if not tilts it in Indiana's favor, at least if you've got a healthy Robert Johnson. I think given the circumstances, even if he does play, he's obviously not 100%, not going to be 100% the rest of this year. So that sort of limits things, but at least gives Indiana some options. Without Robert Johnson, I think Indiana's got some problems because obviously you've got Yogi Ferrell and Nick Zeisloft. I think Zeisloft is going to be at a disadvantage defensively, regardless of who he guards, whether it's Joel Berry or Marcus Page, or even when Nate Britt comes off the bench, maybe that's a little more manageable matchup, but even that's going to be a bit of a challenge. And again, just for sheer depth, I mean, I don't think Indiana wants to turn to Harrison Diego to come off the bench as a walk-on in this kind of situation, in this kind of game against this team. And with the length and size North Carolina has, if Diego does come off the bench, I got to believe they're going to go to that scramble, run and jump, trapping half-court defense that they've become famous for over the years and try and turn him over right away.
So when you look at X factors, obviously it's Rob Johnson, it's Juwan Morgan and Colin Hartman, their ability to actually help out with some of that backcourt and ball handling. When you look at the other side of the fence, Tom Crean's gone out of his way this week to praise Justin Jackson as a guy who would probably fit in pretty well with what Indiana likes to do on their end.
Yeah, I think Justin Jackson, that Justin Jackson Troy Williams matchup is a great matchup to watch because both players are very versatile, do a lot of different things for their teams. They're a factor on the backboards, they're a factor in transition, and they can be a factor defensively when they're focused on that end of the floor. So I think that's a real key. I think if either one of those guys goes off in this game, I think it's a huge advantage to that team. But more importantly, I think what each team just wants out of each guy is a consistent performance. If you get a consistent, productive night out of either one of those guys, it goes a long way towards helping this team.
You mentioned Troy Williams. It's kind of interesting. He and Rob Johnson actually have these subtle connections to the North Carolina program. Obviously, both East Coast guys from Virginia, growing up in that ACC country, really close to the heart of ACC country.
Yeah.
Rob Johnson actually was, he was recruited by North Carolina, and potentially at one point maybe leaning toward North Carolina during that process. I think Troy was also recruited by UNC too, and just kind of interesting to see those guys too, maybe breaking that mold a little bit as East Coast guys who were, at a time recruited by North Carolina. They chose to leave the backyard and frankly, at a time when Indiana was still on the upswing, still recovering, from the early years of Tom Crean's rebuilding project, chose to, maybe swim upstream, try something new, and head to Indiana. It's kind of interesting when you look at that. And on the North Carolina side too, they have Theo Pinson, a guy who maybe at one point was maybe favored to commit to Indiana.
Yeah, and Kennedy Meeks was also recruited by Indiana, and going along with the Robert Johnson theme, Kenny Williams, a freshman for North Carolina, is from the Richmond area, played high school ball with Robert Johnson a year, is best friends with one of Robert Johnson's younger brothers. So a lot of ties between these two teams, recruiting-wise, player-wise. They probably know each other as well as any two teams in this kind of situation, especially teams that haven't actually played against each other in 4 years, basically could at this point. So it'll sort of be interesting how that plays out. A number of guys in the locker room were kind of talking about the going back and forth with the guys they know and maybe a little friendly trash talk to juice things up. So if you see some of that out there Friday night, it's not actually that these guys don't like each other. It's probably more that they know each other really well and just want to get each other's goat pretty much.
And know which buttons to press at that too, I think. And speaking of just the back and forth, it all points to an up and down game. Both teams obviously have the penchant and willingness to run up and down. Does it favor anybody in this matchup? With an Indiana team that prides itself on playing fast, with the North Carolina team that's for years, styled itself in that way. Does it favor anyone in this matchup? Does it?
I don't know that the pace of game itself particularly favors anybody because both teams do like to run. But I think the reason for the running is more the concern, especially if you're Indiana. It can't be because of turnovers and mistakes and bad shots leading to Carolina runouts. If Carolina's running in transition off the occasional missed shot or even off of makes, that's one thing. But if they're running off of mistakes, turnovers, bad shots, that's another thing. So that's really the thing to watch here. I think if anything, Indiana maybe, not that Indiana's more comfortable in a running game, but the running game maybe favors Indiana a little bit if they can get out in transition and get those open shooters spotting up and find those. And again, with all the other things we've talked about, above all else, Indiana has to shoot the ball well from three against North Carolina. They cannot go 6 for 21 from three like they did against Kentucky last week.
Yeah, it's not rocket science. That's absolutely the number one thing for Indiana in this matchup. We'll see how OG Anunoby fares too. It might be a little bit of a different role for him. Maybe asked to ease some of the burden on Thomas Bryant and those folks inside tonight, possibly.
Really curious what role he does play because I think he could be shifted inside against some of the Carolina big guys, but I could also see Indiana going to what we might consider their bigger lineup and putting him on some of the guards to help out with the guard defense because of the lack of depth, especially depending on Robert Johnson's availability that way. So I think it could go both ways. I wouldn't be surprised in this game to ultimately see North Carolina have to go small a little bit to match up with Indiana, but Indiana also have to go big in order to make itself work. And by the time those two teams go those directions, they actually might match up pretty well.
It's going to be pretty fun. This is a building where OG Anunoby's childhood idol, Allen Iverson, starred for many years for the 76ers, so we'll see if a little bit of that magic, well, I don't know if there's any magic there, but anymore, we'll see if he can continue his really positive weekend last week here in Philadelphia. So that'll do it until late Friday evening. I don't know, what are we going to do all day tomorrow?
Take a nap.
I already saw the Liberty Bell.
eat food, take another nap.
Yeah, already saw Independence Hall.
Yeah.
So nap instead of that.
Yeah. I don't know. I give up.
Maybe sweep the floor. This place is filthy. I'm sorry. I've been in a lot of buildings. This is a very dirty place.
I'm sure the Wells Fargo Center custodial staff would welcome you.
If my credentials revoked tomorrow, you know why. All right. Hope to see you guys tomorrow.